Welcome. Welcome to my home today on Father's Day. Tō whautirō. It's lovely to be here with you and to share a story. I'm sitting here between Australia and Ireland. Amazing. Wouldn't it be great if it was so easy to travel between the two places? But stories travel and hearts have wings. And we're so lucky to have all the ways that we have of keeping in touch that we have today. On Father's Day, I was thinking about how even though a father might be very aware of his human limitations, to a child, he will always be a hero and a legend. And so I thought, what better story to tell than a story of a hero and a legend? The story of Cuchulainn, one of the greatest warriors of Ireland. Of course, he wasn't always a great warrior. He was born like all of us from his mother and father, Meadhra and Suldov, and even at the age of 4, he had some kind of knowing of his fate. He had some inner knowledge that he was destined to be remembered. The story of all the many, many stories of Cuchulainn that I'd like to tell you, because it's one of my favourite to tell, is the story of how he got his name. For Cuchulainn was once called Setanta. That was the name his parents gave him. And it wasn't until he was among the warriors of the Red Branch, under the rulership of King Conor MacNessa, that he was granted his new name, the the Hound of Cuchulainn. And this is how the story is told. Fado, fado, long, long ago in Ireland, there was a small boy born, and they called him Setanta. There came a time when he travelled on foot, alone, when he was a very small boy, all the way across the countryside in the middle of the night to make his way to Owenmacca and the home of King Conor MacNessa. For he wanted to take his place among the Red Branch warriors, and he wanted to train with the troops of boys who trained there. There are many stories of the fights that he got into and how he impressed the other boys and King Conor, his uncle, right from the first day that he arrived. He got a reputation for being a great hurler, and often he would take on a whole team of boys single-handedly and beat them all. He wouldn't let them score a point, and he scored many himself. Well, there came a particular day, for you see that there was a tradition amongst the warriors that they would travel to the enclosures of different men and be hosted there and feasted there and celebrated there. And it came to Cuchulainn's turn. Now Cuchulainn was the smith who made all the gear for the horses of King Conor and also his weaponry, a very important man. But he was not a wealthy man, and he asked King Conor to perhaps restrain himself with the number of men that he invited to this gathering. So King Conor, hearing this, decided to take only 50 men to feast among them. But as they were preparing themselves to leave that night for the feast, just as the sun was setting, King Conor went out to the field where the boy troops were practicing, as he often did, because he liked to receive their blessing as he came and went. And he called for young Setanta to come to him and invited him to feast with the men as his guest. But Setanta said, "Oh, but we're not finished with the hurling. The game's only half done." And the king said to him, "Well, I know about you and hurling, and I won't be dragging you away from the game. But do come along after, when the game is done, and join us at the home of Cuchulainn the smith." And the men climbed onto their horses in their fine robes, and they rode out from Owenmacca and all the way to the enclosure of Cuchulainn the smith. They were greeted there with a great welcome and taken in to comfortable seats around the fire. Beautiful food was brought and cups of mead, and the best place, of course, was given to the King Connor himself, right by the fire. Well, when they were all gathering and sitting, laughing, talking, sharing stories, Cuchulainn came by King Connor and leaned in and said to him, "Are all the men gathered here now?" King Connor looked around. "Yes," he said. "Yes, we're all here now." He had completely forgotten Setanta, who was following. And Cuchulainn had the men go out and close the gate on his enclosure. And then they went to release the hound. The hound of Cuchulainn was legendary, ferocious. The way that it would tear flesh frightened even the strongest men, and no one dared interfere with Cuchulainn's family, his animals, his lands, because of the fear of the hound. It took 3 strong chains to restrain him, and it took 3 men on each of the 3 chains to hold them as the hound was released. So with the enclosure gate closed, the hound was released to walk around the circumference and maintain the safety of all those inside. Well, of course, the game of hurling finished, as they always do, and Setanta, with his hurling stick and slitter, made his journey towards Cuchulainn's home. But instead of just walking along, he would toss the slitter high in the air and whack it, and then he would run as fast as he could, and he was fast on his feet, and he would catch the slitter on the end of his hurling stick, and then he would toss it again in the air and whack, and he would run after it and catch it. And doing this all the way, he made his way to Cuchulainn's enclosure. But as he arrived, he saw that the gate was closed. And he stood a moment wondering how he would get inside, for he could see the lanterns lit beyond. And as he stood there, he heard a deep rumbling growl in the darkness. He felt the earth move under his feet, and 2 lamps suddenly lit the darkness, the eyes of the hound of Cuchulainn. It rose onto its feet. It could smell the boy Setanta and was ready to defend the enclosure of Cuchulainn. It began towards him, slow, even steps that shook the earth. And Setanta stood his ground, hurling stick in one hand, slitter in the other. He stood and he watched, and he didn't take his eyes off that beast as it started to run faster and faster towards him. Its eyes rolled wide open in its head, its mouth hanging down, its tongue red and wet, lolling from side to side, and flashes of white teeth. It was coming faster and faster. Setanta stood steady, took his moment, threw the slitter, and thwack, and it shot straight down the mouth of the beast and out the other end. The beast gave up a huge cry and fell to the ground, and the earth shook. The men inside the enclosure heard, and they came out, and they saw the hound on the ground. King Connor's heart missed a beat, and he thought perhaps that the hound had injured young Setanta, his favourite. But then they saw Setanta standing there, looking down at the beast, dead. Cuchulainn came forward and he knelt down beside the beast. "Oh, my beast, my hound, you are such a loss to my family. You are part of my family, and now you lie dead. You have faithfully defended us, my cattle, my family, my lands. How will I defend myself without you? And young Setanta was moved by the grief of Cuchulainn and saw the injury he had caused defending himself. I am Setanta, nephew to King Conor mac Nessa, and I will raise you a pup to be a hound as strong as this one. And till such times as such a pup is raised, I will defend your home, your family, and your lands. And from amongst the men came Cuchulainn the druid. And he put his hand on Setanta's shoulder and he said, so that all could hear, you shall now be known as Cuchulainn, the Hound of Cuchulainn. And by this name you shall be remembered down through time. Well, Cuchulainn kept his word and defended the home of Cuchulainn well. And when the time came, a hound that he had raised was put in his place. And that is how the young Setanta came to be the Hound of Cuchulainn. So goes the story. Have a wonderful Father's Day. Enjoy. Slán.